Wyoming Territory, 1878. The wind carried the scent of sage and coming rain across the rolling grasslands as Hope O'Malley stared at her father with disbelieving eyes. The ranch house's kitchen suddenly felt as cold as January despite the August heat pressing against the windows. "You've what?" she whispered, her fingers clutching the worn wooden table. "I've arranged it all," Walter O'Malley said, not meeting his daughter's gaze. "Tillman's offering good money. $500 for your hand, and God knows we need it with the drought killing our cattle." Hope's mother stood silently by the cast-iron stove, eyes downcast, her hands twisting her apron into knots. The silence stretched between them like a canyon too wide to cross. "Father, please," Hope said, her voice barely audible. "Mr. Tillman is 60 years old. He's buried 3 wives already." Her father's fist crashed down on the table. "And what use are you here? Can't cook worth a damn. Can't keep house properly. Your stitching is crooked, and you spend more time with your head in books than doing proper women's work. We've tried to find you a suitable match for years, girl. No one wants a wife who speaks her mind like you do. Tillman doesn't care about that. He just wants someone to warm his bed and give him sons before he dies." Hope felt her heart shatter like dropped china. 22 years of life on this ranch, and this was her value? A few $100s and a quick sale to a man who'd work her to death like he had his previous wives? "You leave in 3 days," her father said, rising from the table. "Pack only what you can carry on 1 horse." As her father left the kitchen, Hope looked to her mother for support, for any sign of resistance. The woman simply turned back to the stove, shoulders slumped in defeat. That night, Hope slipped out of the ranch house with nothing but a small bundle of belongings, her mother's locket around her neck, and $20 she'd saved from selling eggs over the years. The moon lit her path as she walked away from the only home she'd ever known, her honey blonde hair catching the silver light. Her blue calico dress, patched at the elbows but the nicest she owned, rustled against the tall grass. She had no destination, no plan beyond escaping the fate her father had arranged. But in the vastness of the Wyoming Territory, a woman alone faced dangers perhaps worse than an old man's cruel hands. Thomas Tucker lowered his rifle, squinting through the morning light at the figure stumbling across his land. He'd been tracking a mountain lion that had killed 2 of his goats, but what he'd found instead was far more surprising. A woman, looking half dead from exposure, making her way through the foothills of his mountain property. At 25, Thomas had lived alone in these mountains for 3 years, building his cabin and small ranch from nothing after returning from the war. His light brown hair, usually tied back when he worked, fell loose around his tanned face as he watched the stranger. He was tall and lean, hardened by mountain life, but still young enough that the lines around his eyes only showed when he smiled. He approached cautiously, leading his horse. "Ma'am, are you in need of assistance?" The woman startled like a deer, wide hazel eyes finding him through strands of dirty blonde hair. She looked ready to bolt, then swayed dangerously on her feet. Thomas reached her just as her knees buckled, catching her before she hit the ground. Up close, he could see she was young, maybe 20 or so, and despite the dirt and exhaustion, uncommonly pretty. "Water," she managed to whisper before her eyes rolled back. Hope awoke to the smell of coffee and the crackling of a fire. For a moment, she thought she was back home, that her father selling her had been nothing but a nightmare. Then she felt the unfamiliar bearskin beneath her and opened her eyes to a rustic cabin she'd never seen before. "You're awake," a deep voice said. "Good. I was starting to worry." She struggled to sit up, pulling a woolen blanket around her shoulders as she took in the man sitting by the stone fireplace. He wasn't what she'd expected of a mountain man. Young, clean-shaven save for a hint of stubble, with kind eyes that reminded her of warm honey. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice rough from sleep. "My cabin. About 40 miles northeast of Laramie." He poured coffee into a tin cup and approached, offering it to her. "Thomas Tucker. Most folks just call me Tucker." She accepted the cup with trembling hands. "Hope O'Malley. Well, Miss O'Malley, would you mind telling me why I found you half dead on my property, 2 days' ride from the nearest town?" Hope stared into the dark liquid, wondering how much to tell this stranger. But something in his steady gaze made her think he might be trustworthy. And what choice did she have? "I'm running away," she admitted. "My father, he sold me to an old man named Tillman. For $500. Her voice broke on the last word. Tucker's expression darkened. Sold you? Like you were cattle? He said I was useless. Couldn't cook well enough. Couldn't sew straight enough. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. Said no one would want a wife like me anyway, so I might as well bring the family some money. Tucker shook his head, a muscle twitching in his jaw. That's not how decent men treat their daughters. Hope sipped her coffee, its warmth spreading through her empty stomach. I left with nothing but what I could carry. I thought I could make it to Cheyenne, maybe find work as a shop girl or a teacher's assistant. I can read and write well. But I got lost, and then the rain came. You've been asleep for nearly a day, Tucker said. You were half-starved and feverish when I found you. Hope looked around the cabin. It was small but well-built, with a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with books and supplies, and a narrow bed in the corner where she now sat. You live here alone? She asked. Tucker nodded. Just me and a few goats, some chickens, and my horse. He stood and moved to the stove where a pot was simmering. I've made stew. You should eat something. As he ladled stew into a bowl, Hope couldn't help noticing the careful way he moved, the strength in his shoulders. He wasn't like the rough cowboys from town or the harsh ranchers like her father. There was a gentleness to him that seemed out of place in this wild country. Why are you helping me? She asked as he handed her the bowl. Tucker settled back into his chair. My ma raised me to help those in need. Besides, he added with a slight smile that transformed his serious face, it's not often I get visitors up here. Hope ate slowly, savoring the first real food she'd had in days. It's good, she said, surprised. Tucker's smile widened. Just because I live alone doesn't mean I have to eat poorly. I learned to cook in the army. You fought in the war? He nodded, his expression growing distant. Union cavalry. Enlisted when I was 17, right at the end. Saw enough to know I wanted something different after. Hope studied him, seeing now the shadow that passed behind his eyes, not unlike the look her mother sometimes had when remembering the baby brother Hope had lost to fever years ago. What will you do now? Tucker asked, changing the subject. Hope set down her empty bowl. I don't know. I can't go back home. This Tillman fellow, would he come looking for you? Maybe. $500 is a lot of money. Tucker considered this. You're welcome to stay here until you're stronger. It's not safe for a woman to travel alone in these parts. Hope felt panic rise in her throat. Stay here, alone, with a man she'd just met? I couldn't impose. I'll sleep in the lean-to with the goats, he said, seeming to read her thoughts. You can bar the door at night if it makes you feel safer. She studied his face, looking for any sign of deception, any hint of the kind of men her father had warned her about. But all she saw was honest concern. Just until I'm stronger, she agreed finally. Then I'll move on. Tucker nodded, but there was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. Relief, perhaps? Or something else entirely. That night, as promised, Tucker took his bedroll to the small shed attached to the cabin. Hope lay awake in his narrow bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the mountain night. Wolves howled in the distance, and the wind whispered through pine needles. She clutched her mother's locket and wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake trusting a stranger, or if perhaps, for the first time in her life, she'd found someone who saw her as more than useless. Asterisk days stretched into a week, then 2. Hope regained her strength under Tucker's quiet care. She insisted on earning her keep, taking over the cooking, improving with Tucker's patient guidance, and helping with the goats and chickens. To her surprise, Tucker seemed to appreciate her help rather than criticize her efforts. You have a way with animals, he commented one evening as they watched a new kid goat wobbling around the pen. That little one wouldn't have made it without your attention. Hope smiled, pleased by the praise. I've always liked animals better than people. They don't judge you for reading too much or speaking out of turn. Tucker leaned against the fence. What sort of books do you like to read? The question caught her off guard. Her father had always mocked her reading as a waste of time. All kinds. History, poetry. She hesitated. Adventure stories, mostly. Tucker's face brightened. I have a few books inside. Not much of a collection, but you're welcome to them. That night, Hope discovered Tucker's small shelf of books, worn volumes of Dickens and Cooper, poetry by Whitman, and practical guides to farming and building. One book in particular caught her eye, a collection of Shakespeare's plays, its leather binding cracked with age. This was my father's, Tucker explained when she held it up. He was a schoolteacher back in Ohio. You don't sound like the son of a schoolteacher, Hope observed. Tucker laughed. 3 years in the cavalry and 3 more in these mountains will change how any man talks. As September turned the aspen leaves golden, they fell into a comfortable routine. During the days, they worked side by side. Tucker teaching Hope how to repair fencing, how to smoke meat for winter storage, how to read the weather in the clouds. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, sometimes reading aloud from Tucker's books, sometimes just talking. Hope learned that Tucker had come west after the war, working cattle drives and in mining camps before saving enough to claim this land. He'd built the cabin himself, determined to create something lasting after years of destruction. "Why alone?" she asked one night. "Most men I know want a wife, children." Tucker stared into the fire. "I came back from the war different. Needed the quiet. Needed space to remember who I was." He glanced at her. "What about you? Did you never think of marriage before your father's arrangement?" Hope tucked her legs beneath her on the bearskin rug. "No one asked. The boys in town thought I was strange, too bookish, too outspoken." She smiled ruefully. "My father was right about that much. I'm not what men around here want in a wife." "Then the men around here are fools," Tucker said quietly, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Something fluttered in Hope's chest, something she didn't dare name. The next morning, Tucker announced he needed to go to town for supplies. "I'll be gone 3 days, maybe 4 if the weather turns," he said, loading his pack horse. "There's plenty of food stored, and you know how to care for the animals." Hope nodded, ignoring the strange hollowness she felt at the thought of being without his company. "I'll be fine." Tucker hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "Take this," he said, pressing a pistol into her hand. "Just in case." "In case of what?" "Probably nothing. But there's been talk of rustlers in these parts. And if this Tillman is still looking for you." Hope's fingers tightened around the weapon. "I know how to shoot. My brother taught me before he left for California." Tucker smiled. "I figured as much. Still, bar the door at night." She watched him ride away, a strange anxiety settling over her. Only when he disappeared from view did she realize the truth that had been growing in her heart these past weeks. She was falling in love with Thomas Tucker. Tucker rode into Laramie with more than supplies on his mind. The general store owner, Henry Wilson, greeted him with surprise. "Tucker, wasn't expecting you until the first snow. Winter coming early up your way?" Tucker shook his head, unloading his list of needed supplies. "No, just preparing. Need some things I don't usually stock." Wilson raised an eyebrow at the items: calico fabric, a woman's hairbrush, cooking spices Tucker had never purchased before. "Taking up sewing in your old age, Tucker?" Tucker ignored the jibe. "Heard any news of a man named Tillman looking for a young woman? Blonde, goes by Hope O'Malley." Wilson's expression shifted. "Matter of fact, there was a fellow asking after a girl of that description about a month back. Offering a reward. Said she was his intended who got cold feet." Tucker's jaw tightened. "What did you tell him?" "Truth, hadn't seen her." "But Tucker," Wilson leaned closer. "Word is that Tillman fellow's got a reputation. Rough with his women. Last one died under questionable circumstances." Tucker nodded grimly. "I'd heard similar." As Tucker collected his supplies, the door to the general store swung open. A heavy-set man with cold eyes entered, flanked by 2 younger men with the hard look of hired guns. "Afternoon, Wilson," the older man said. "Any word on that girl I asked about?" Tucker kept his head down, loading items into his saddlebags as Wilson replied, "Nothing yet, Mr. Tillman. But I'll keep an ear out." Tillman grunted, then noticed Tucker. "Don't believe we've met. You from around these parts?" Tucker straightened, meeting the man's gaze. "Just passing through. Got a small place up in the mountains." Tillman's eyes narrowed. "Mountains, eh? You haven't happened to see a young woman, have you? Blonde, pretty. Ran away from her family after they arranged our marriage. Her father's beside himself with worry." The lie came easily. "No, don't see many people where I live. Especially not young women." Tillman studied him for a moment longer, then turned his attention back to Wilson. "I'm doubling the reward. $300 for information leading to her return. Her father sold her to me fair and square, and I aim to collect what's mine." Tucker felt his blood run cold at the confirmation of Hope's story. This man spoke of her like property, not a person. As Tillman and his men left, Tucker turned to Wilson. "Add ammunition to my order. And coffee, the good kind." Wilson gave him a knowing look. Planning on having company this winter, Tucker? Tucker simply handed over the money for his purchases. Just preparing for whatever comes. Asterisk on the third night of Tucker's absence. Hope awakened to the sound of voices outside the cabin. Her heart raced as she grabbed Tucker's pistol from beneath her pillow and crept to the window. 3 men on horseback circled the property, their faces hidden in the darkness. Her first thought was of Tucker. Had something happened to him? But as one rider came into the moonlight, she saw an unfamiliar face. Not Tucker's men, then. Rustlers, perhaps, or worse. She backed away from the window when one rider pointed toward the goat pen. They hadn't seen her yet. Maybe they were just after the livestock. The crack of a breaking branch nearby sent her hard into her throat. Someone was at the side of the cabin, trying the shuttered window. With trembling hands, she checked that the door was barred, then positioned herself in the shadows, pistol trained on the entrance. The door handle rattled. "Looks empty," a voice called. "Maybe they're both gone." "Both? They knew someone lived here with Tucker?" "Check the shed," another voice ordered. "Girl might be hiding there." Ice filled Hope's veins. They weren't rustlers. They were looking for her. Had Tillman sent them? Or worse, was he with them? The windows were too small for escape. She was trapped. Her finger tensed on the trigger as the door shuddered under a heavy blow. A gunshot cracked through the night, but not from her pistol. Outside, a man cried out in pain. "That's far enough," came Tucker's voice, deadly calm. "The next shot won't be a warning." Hope nearly collapsed with relief. "We're just looking for a runaway girl," one of the men called. "Heard she might be in these parts." "There's no girl here," Tucker replied. "Just me and my rifle. And I don't take kindly to trespassers. Tillman's offering $300 for her return. Then Tillman can come look himself. Now get off my land before I decide you're trying to steal my livestock." Hope held her breath, listening to the shuffle of retreating boots and the sound of horses being mounted. "This ain't over," one man called back. "Tillman will be coming himself." Only when the hoofbeats faded into the distance did Hope unbar the door. Tucker stood outside, rifle still ready, his face hard with anger. When he saw her, his expression softened with relief. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, suddenly aware she was wearing only her night dress. "They were looking for me." Tucker nodded grimly. "Tillman's in Laramie. He's got men searching the whole territory for you." He stepped inside, barring the door behind him. "We need to talk." By the light of the rekindled fire, Tucker told her everything he'd learned in town. About Tillman's reputation, the increased reward, and the rumors about his previous wives. "He won't stop looking," Tucker concluded. "Not with the money he paid your father and his pride at stake." Hope stared into the flames. "Then I need to go farther. California, maybe. Or Oregon." Tucker was quiet for a long moment. "There's another option." She looked up to find him watching her intently. "Marry me." Hope blinked, certain she'd misheard. "What?" Tucker ran a hand through his hair. "If you're my wife, Tillman has no claim on you. Not legally. You want to marry me to solve a legal problem?" Hope couldn't keep the hurt from her voice. Tucker moved to kneel before her. "No. I want to marry you because these weeks with you have been the best of my life. Because you're smart and kind and strong. Because when you're not here, this cabin isn't home anymore." Hope's heart pounded. "You barely know me." "I know enough." He took her hands in his. "I know you're the first person I've wanted to share my life with since the war. I know I'm happier with you than I've ever been alone. But I can't cook well, you're learning. And I don't care. I speak my mind too much. Good. I value honesty. I read when I should be working." Tucker laughed. "Hope, I'm not asking for a housekeeper. I'm asking for a partner. Someone to build a life with." Hope searched his face in the firelight. "You're serious?" "Completely." He squeezed her hands. "But I understand if you don't feel the same. If you want to leave, I'll help you get wherever you want to go, safely." Hope felt tears filling her eyes. All her life she'd been told she was worthless, useless as a woman because she didn't fit the mold of what a wife should be. Yet here was this man, this good, kind man, offering her not just protection, but partnership. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll marry you." The smile that broke across Tucker's face was like sunrise after the longest night. Asterisk. The next morning, Tucker surprised Hope by pulling out the supplies he'd bought in town. Fabric for a new dress, spices for cooking, and small comforts she hadn't had in weeks. "There's something else," he said, leading her outside. Behind the cabin, In a clearing facing the mountains stood the frame of a new structure. Pine logs had been notched and stacked to form the beginnings of walls. "What is this?" Hope asked. Tucker took her hand. "Our home. I've been working on it whenever you were busy with the animals or reading. The cabin's too small for 2 people long-term." Hope walked around the foundation, taking in the size, nearly twice that of the current cabin. "You started building this before you asked me to marry you," she realized. Tucker looked slightly embarrassed. "I was hoping you might stay." Even before Tillman's men showed up, Hope felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the autumn sunshine. This man had seen her value when no one else had literally built a future with her in mind. "When will it be finished?" she asked. "Before winter, if we work together." Tucker pointed to different areas. "Bedroom here. Living area there. A proper kitchen for you to learn cooking in. And this?" Hope asked, pointing to a small area tucked in the corner of the planned house. Tucker's smile turned shy. "A room for books, with a desk by the window. I thought you might like to write those adventure stories you're always reading." Hope couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Instead, she stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. Their first kiss, sweet and promising. They were married the following Sunday by a traveling preacher who stopped at their mountain home by providence or luck. The ceremony was simple, vows exchanged before the half-built walls of their new home, with only the mountains and a few curious goats as witnesses. Hope wore a dress of deep blue calico that Tucker had purchased in town, her honey-blonde hair braided with wildflowers. As autumn deepened into winter, they worked side by side to finish their home before the heavy snows came. Hope proved adept at chinking the logs with mud and moss, while Tucker crafted sturdy furniture from pine and aspen. The original cabin became their storehouse and workshop. The first snow fell on the very day they moved into their completed home. That night, as they lay together in their new bed, Tucker traced the curve of Hope's cheek with gentle fingers. "Are you happy here?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. Hope nestled closer against him, listening to the wind outside their snug walls. "Happier than I ever thought possible. Even without other people around. Without town life." She smiled. "I never fit in with town life anyway. Here, I can be myself." Tucker's arms tightened around her. "I have something for you." He reached to the small table beside their bed and handed her a package wrapped in brown paper. Hope unwrapped it to find a leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. "For your stories," Tucker explained. "The adventures you'll write." Hope ran her fingers over the smooth leather. "Our life is adventure enough for me. Maybe, but I still want to read the stories you create." He kissed her forehead. "You're not useless, Hope. You never were." Spring came to the mountains with a riot of wildflowers and new life. The goats delivered healthy kids, the garden Hope had planted began to sprout, and the clear mountain air filled with birdsong. Hope sat at her desk by the window, writing in her journal, when she spotted riders approaching, 3 of them, coming up the trail from town. Her heart lurched with familiar fear, but she forced herself to remain calm as she called for Tucker. They stood together on the porch as the riders approached. Hope recognized the lead rider immediately. Tillman, older and harder looking than she'd imagined from descriptions. Tucker's arm around her waist tightened. "Stay behind me if trouble starts," he murmured. The riders stopped at the edge of their property. Tillman's cold eyes fixed on Hope. "So this is where you've been hiding," he said. "Your father sold you to me, girl. I paid good money." "She's not for sale," Tucker replied evenly. "She's my wife now." Tillman spat on the ground. "Convenient arrangement. But I made a deal with her father, and I expect it to be honored. $500 is $500. The law doesn't recognize the sale of people, Mr. Tillman," Tucker said. "But I understand your frustration at losing your investment." Hope looked at him in surprise as Tucker stepped forward. "I'll reimburse your $500 if you sign a document relinquishing any claim on my wife," Tucker continued. "Fair compensation for your trouble." Tillman's eyes narrowed. "Where does a mountain man get that kind of money?" Tucker smiled thinly. "I wasn't always a mountain man, and I've saved carefully over the years." For a tense moment, Hope thought Tillman would refuse. Or worse, try to take her by force. But greed won out over pride. "Let's see this document," Tillman said. "And the money." Inside their home, Tucker retrieved a lockbox from beneath a floorboard. From it, he took a leather pouch heavy with coins and a document already prepared. Evidence, Hope realized. that Tucker had anticipated this confrontation. Tillman examined both, then signed his name with a flourish. She was probably more trouble than she's worth anyway. Can't cook, can't keep house properly. Hope felt Tucker tense beside her, but his voice remained steady. Your loss, Mr. Tillman. Now I suggest you and your men leave our property. When the riders had disappeared down the mountain trail, Hope turned to Tucker. You prepared for that? He nodded. I've been saving that money since I heard about Tillman in town. Figured he'd eventually track us down. Where did you get $500? Tucker led her back inside. Army pay, plus some lucky strikes during my mining days. He shrugged. I never had much to spend it on up here. Hope sat heavily in a chair. I can't believe it's over. That he's really gone. Tucker knelt before her, taking her hands. You're free now. Truly free. No one has any claim on you but yourself. Hope leaned forward to kiss him. And you. I gave myself to you freely. As I give myself to you, he replied. Partners, remember? That night, as they lay tangled together watching moonlight spill across their bed, Hope marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From a father who saw her as worthless to a husband who valued her mind as much as her heart. From a family that sold her to a man who built her a home. From useless girl to cherished wife. What are you thinking about? Tucker asked, his voice drowsy with contentment. Hope smiled in the darkness. I'm thinking I finally know what belonging feels like. Tucker pulled her closer. Welcome home, Hope, he whispered. Welcome home. Outside, the Wyoming wind swept across their mountain, carrying the promise of tomorrow across the wild, beautiful land they now shared. Two souls who had found in each other not just love, but the rarest gift of all, acceptance, exactly as they were.